I was asking the same damn thing myself every single time I came back to this one video. Hello everybody, and we are talking about something a little bit interesting today. We are going to be taking a look at Medal of Honor 2010, the game that EA finally greenlit after they realized that Call of Duty was stepping on their necks with their giant boot heels, and they really couldn't compete by keeping astern with the World War II idea. So, they threw out every bit of their integrity and decided to try and beat them by following their footsteps. This game is so modern military-esque that it really went completely overboard to try and overshadow the thing that was absolutely killing them back in 2010. Not only was this game made a couple of years after Modern Warfare completely reinvigorated the FPS genre into what it would have looked like in the 360 era, but they completely fumbled any sort of idea on how to make this game stand out, and I believe they tried to keep, for some reason, with the Medal of Honor identity and tried to make it as realistic and honorable as possible. So what we ended up with was one of the most generic modern military stories that I've ever seen, and something that instantly fell into the background and the gray water of the genre and never came back out. This thing was supposed to be the reinvigoration point, the re-steering of the IP towards the modern days, and it completely screwed itself over by being completely boring and having nothing new to show for itself. I went over this video twice, and I could not for the life of me tell you what the actual plot of this story was supposed to be. The best thing that I can tell from the cutscenes, from the banter, from the dialogue, is that this is a basic boilerplate kill the terrorist, name of the day sort of mission that gets derailed towards the end and can become something almost different when we switch protagonists and the final mission has us rescuing the old protagonist and then getting out of Afghanistan. Unlike Modern Warfare, that did this sort of modern military tropey story in a pseudo-Afghanistan, doing the same sorts of things, the same sort of overarching plot of just kill the terrorist and WMDs in the Middle East, but they usually had the good graces to change the names around and make sure that we weren't directly, specifically, innately in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Iran, or wherever else you would want to set something in the Middle East. Medal of Honor decides to delve into its realistic backbone of its franchise and decides to, you know what, damn the consequences, damn the controversies, we're going to set this thing in Afghanistan, we're going to have all the realistic hardware, we're going to have all the abbreviations, all the acronyms, this thing is going to be as military realistic story that we can possibly manage. And while nothing in this game stood out in my memory, nothing I remember about this game, absolute zero effect on my memory, the one thing that I remembered about this game was exactly what I put in the title. This game has a really odd boner for military jargon. Like, they have military jargon throughout this sort of part of the genre, and you do learn what it means if you play enough of these games. The jargon is usually toned down enough so that a general audience can understand what's going on, and usually pick up the acronyms and the banter that they need to know to keep the story going forward to understand the mission. Medal of Honor is drowning in so much technical nonsense that at points I could barely tell what was going on because it goes deep. It goes way deeper than I ever thought that a quote-unquote AAA top-shelf video game would ever have gone for. I thought that this genre was usually going to be as generalized as possible, but yet I did not expect someone to just come out of nowhere and say, hey, we're running out of bingo fuel. And at that point I was like, oh, what the actual hell did I just hear? Because I have never heard that term before. And then when I was going through the whole game, I was seeing things like the QFR, the SIGINT. They're telling me to go to the soft cam, they're telling me to go grab the CAS, they're telling me to exit top deck, they're telling me to get on the AFO freak. It's like, I could not believe that this game wanted to get so technical, so in-depth on military hardware when nothing in the game specifically tells us what these things mean. They just throw it into the dialogue and expect you to already know what's going on. Which means that this game might actually have a niche audience for how realistic it is, because nothing in this game is really out there. I don't even know if this game has a WMD, and I think that the most powerful things in this game might be Stinger missiles from helicopters and drone machine guns. I don't think we actually even see a huge explosion. I think the biggest, ground cover situation you run into is like a pseudo sandstorm, or just a sandstorm bathed in sunlight so you can barely tell what's going on. It's in this mission where everything's like sandblasted and really, really baked white, so it's very hard to see what you're doing at any sort of distance. That's the one thing I remember about this game, is that its bizarre adherence to being as honest to true life as possible for the military aspect. So much so that, again, they completely failed to make the story, the thing that you're supposed to be doing, stand out. And on top of that, I know it's very typical for Modern Warfare games to never give a shit about its characters or its narrative or any sort of anything like that. So you're never really supposed to know who the characters are. You're never supposed to get attached to them because, in tropey fashion, any of them can be killed at any time. But even so, I don't even know if they themselves say the characters' names. I think it's just all code names, which can work, but again, it falls into every character just falls into a background or just into their role rather than them as a person. The only thing I can tell you about the characters in this game is that one of them's named Rabbit and one of them's named Voodoo. And that's it. I don't know anything more about them than that, other than they're just guys who are on the team. And speaking of guys on the team, in typical fashion, they do put you in a team, but they only barely help out. They're occasionally getting a kill, but really the only reason why you even have a team in this game is to provide some exciting gunplay noises and just people to banter with so the game doesn't end up getting boring. It's just there to make noise and to keep the scene with some sort of energy going, to really pump up the gunfights. Otherwise, this game would just fall into pretty static boredom really easily, where all you're hearing is just the whish of bullets as you're trying to dial in your kills and get them going. And the game's story is so generic that I don't even know who the enemies are that we're supposed to be fighting. All I can tell you about them is that they're probably Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. I think this one is the Taliban because they get mentioned quite a bit. And then there's a slight wrinkle in the plot with the President or the Secretary of Defense being a minor character. He's consistently coming on to the base via video chat to direct the mission that the colonel has all the details on, and the president is just clueless commander giving the commands, telling him what to do, even though he doesn't really know what's going on, so they don't really take him seriously until he tries to pull the hard-nosed, I'm your commanding officer and you're gonna do what I tell you, and then they end up fucking over the president, ignoring him and then doing what they want to do by the end of the story. And to be fair, the president is not ridiculously evil, or really evil in any sort of sense from what I could tell. He's kind of just cautious. He's a bit more of a realist. He tries to get the colonel to see that he shouldn't stick to his ideals and should cut his losses when they are worth cutting. He tries to keep him on the realistic sort of thing. Try to tell him what the timetables would be if they went in that direction. You shouldn't always try to save every Marine in the field, because sometimes it's completely unrealistic to do so, because it's just going to put more people into danger. At least that's what he thinks. But of course, this being a fictional military story, of course they're going to run in, they're going to rescue every one of their guys, or they're going to let one of them die just to bring up the drama, just to give their ending some sort of pathos, even though it doesn't really make all that much sense. because what's the point of even adding to that? It's like, real life has consequences and people can die on the field of battle. Of course they can! We've been mowing them down by the fucking hundreds this entire time! We've been doing it with drones and with Stinger missiles on our own time! We were doing that! We were painting the frickin' marking points for the missiles from our artillery batteries. Of course we know that. We don't need a poignant scene of a guy's body being covered with a blanket on the back of the helicopter and someone holding his dog tags and being kind of sad about it. Especially when, again, this is a goddamn typical first-person shooter where the emotions of any scene do not matter. And that's kind of this game in the nutshell, since I kind of ran out of things to talk about. This game just doesn't matter. This was supposed to be the reboot of Medal of Honor, to keep it in step with modern sensibilities, and likewise, it does feel like one of the most 2010sian games ever made. But Modern Warfare did this correctly by having some unique missions, some unique moments, and characters, let's say like 3 characters throughout the trilogy that you were supposed to remember and actually stood out. It was fantastical in the ways that it was supposed to be to make it the top front runner amongst the entire competition. Medal of Honor 2010 is just the competition. It is the middle liner that no one talks about. No one has ever mentioned this game, and for good reason. It does look nice, it does have a good art style, but it looks and plays like every other single Modern Warfare shooter ever made. And that was the problem with 75% of these Modern Warfare shooters, is that they played, they looked, they quacked, they walked exactly like each other. None of them tried to differentiate their stories, do anything interesting, have an interesting historical bent, do anything with their realistic setting, have any characters, or any sort of story moments. Like, I remember Black Ops, when you are rescuing the main Russian guy that I just can't remember off the top of my head. You go on a prison breakout to get him out of prison because he is a veteran and he has skills that you need. You needed that guy, and I remember that mission at least, because it was interesting, because it was unique, because it had plot points and character interaction. This game has none of that. It has the production value that you expect, it has the gunplay that you expect, it has the walking around, the shooting, and the military hardware that you expect. It's a game that you expect on every single damned front. Nothing about it stands out. It's not even shitty on the length. It's about 5 hours, which is pretty short, but it's at least within the acceptable range of an FPS. It's not that hard. It's not that interesting. The only thing that I can remember about this game is its military jargon. That's the one thing that this game has to differentiate itself at all. And the only thing that does to serve is to show that at least DICE did their research, they're weirdly into it, and it's super realistic. Which I know could strike a chord with a military enthusiast veteran audience. This thing is not for general audiences. They did not build it specifically for that. It's not a silly, goofy time with guns. It's not a ridiculous, pulpy adventure. It's a gritty, realistic look at counter-terrorism. At least as much as a video game from Electronic Arts can get away with. And I guess you can respect it for that. But as soon as you're done respecting it for going that extra mile to keep in the realism, you're gonna forget about it instantly. I could not tell you, after reading 80% of the dialogue in this game, what the actual plot of the game was about. In the beginning, they're talking about a guy named Tariq, which might lead them to the guy they're looking for, which tells me that it's a typical counter-terrorist kill the guy plot. There's not even a WMD to stop, so there's no stakes, so why should I care? There's no characters that I care about. I can't tell you what the story is. The locations, I don't even know where we are specifically in the Middle East, so why should I give a shit? What is the point of these guys being there other than to just kill bad guys? That's okay. Okay, if you're going to establish that they're bad, then yeah, it's good to kill them, but why? We need the why. And without the why, almost everything before that starts falling the hell apart. And the only thing that could have saved it was interesting, unique gameplay, which completely failed. The reboot was a failure, and at least EA tried again with Warfighter, but then basically Medal of Honor completely fell apart. Because EA did not care to compete. They thought they could compete by putting on the Medal of Honor dress and just say, hey, we're part of the gang now. Well, you're part of the gang, but the gang got forgotten. As soon as Modern Warfare stopped doing Modern Warfare, that was the end of the genre because they were the front runner. You were the competition, Medal of Honor, and you got wasted.